people are like, oh, how could you possibly not just want to kill people if you don't have empathy? That would be like you're a Christian and you're like, thou shalt not kill. And then you decide, you know what, maybe I'm agnostic. And then you just go on a killing spree. Like, clearly thou shalt not kill is not the only reason.
But they think that it is. They really do. They really do.
And that troubles me.
That troubles me too. I think those people should stay Christians.
They're like, if you don't feel like guilty, for instance, about stuff, then why wouldn't you just go like around killing people? And I ask, and for what would I do? Why am I spending money and time hunting people down to kill them? Why would that ever be something I choose to do instead of watching Stranger Things and eating popcorn?
Welcome back to If I'm Really Honest, where we're doing part 2 of a conversation with M.E. Thomas, author, lawyer, Mormon, and psychopath, which doesn't really change as much as you would think, which is kind of the point. And yet, it is pretty much all we're going to talk about today. In the first half, I tried really hard to not be offensive and prove that I was a good guy. And in the second half, I tried to be really honest, even when it showed my ignorance. So I give you one more time the person behind the mask, the author known as M.E. Thomas. I think I used up all of my least ignorant questions in our first half.
So, let's get the ignorant ones.
Yes. So then, apologies ahead of time. These are really questions that I have and that I wish I didn't have, but there's only one way to get from ignorance to less ignorance, I guess.
I totally agree.
So then, well, first of all, I'm curious, do you think that you are less psychopathic now than you were before when you started your journey of finding yourself?
Yes, totally. I will tell you the things that aren't different first, and then I'll go back to the things that are different. The things that aren't different, I still don't feel effective empathy. So somebody's crying or something, I'm not feeling what they feel. I don't even have a belief inside of me that thinks that that's true, that other people to me it's kind of like, oh, that sounds a little bit like witchcraft or something, or
Okay.
like, interesting that you guys think that that's what's happening. My guess is, I am keeping an open mind, though, I should say. I have because I know there's
I want to clarify. So to you have a hard time believing that we feel that. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Totally kind of have a question mark in my mind, let's say. No belief either way, but a suspicion that that's not what's happening. And the idea is that, let's say a child is crying, are you immediately upset? That's a question kind of for you, I guess.
Right. I mean, I think the answer is yes. I would say yes to anybody else, but I'm being more thoughtful here because I assume that there's you've got some truth in your perspective. The upset that I feel, well, I don't know what emotions you do resonate with. What is a feeling that you have?
I mean, I can be upset. I can be all the emotions. Honestly, before I was all the emotions too, but I just wasn't recognizing them, So, but this is why I think, especially with empathy, though, why I ask about with a child is I think often we look at a child and we think there's just some emotional dysregulation happening as a result of their psychological development. They're throwing a fit and we think maybe, do they need a nap? We don't immediately jump in and think, oh my gosh, I'm feeling the frustration of this child myself. The emotional empathy, the effective empathy doesn't seem to be happening when we see a baby cry. We're not like, the world's ending. I also feel like the world's ending.
So I do, but it's funny that you say that, though, because my wife feels that less. And I would say she's more empathetic, but also she's had 6 kids and she can tell this baby needs a nap. And I'm like, oh, the baby's sad. And she's like, whatever, put the baby down.
Exactly. And so I just I wonder a little bit, are we projecting? And are we projecting into a space that's unknown? But if we have a thought, if we think the baby just needs a nap, we don't project our mind in. But if we see somebody, if this has happened to me twice, this past, it was actually about a year ago, this happened to me twice, and within a couple months of each other. I was sitting looking at the ocean, kind of close to where I live, just kind of like quietly meditating, thinking my thoughts. And some kid on a bike is like, "Hey." And it's behind me. I don't think he's talking to me. "Hey, hey, you," or whatever. I turn around and look, and he's like, "Hey, are you okay?" This has happened to me twice, like within a couple months. And I was like, I must have like the look of, a middle-aged woman that needs to have a little kid, a little boy with a bike. Different boys, different bikes. Ask, "Hey, are you okay?" But, I think that if we see that type of person, that type of middle-aged woman, let's say, looking maybe a little bit sad or something, maybe we are more alarmed by that, enough to kind of ask, other than, like, if we see a kid melting down in a McDonald's, we're kinda like, "Okay, the kid's probably fine," you know? But if we see kind of like an adult or something, I think so in this context, in this gray area of not knowing why I could be looking, the way I do, these kids are worried. I think they truly were worried about me. And so I think that sort of worry and question maybe like invites people to fill in the blanks. And maybe there's something about like our tribal kind of connection to people that says, hey, these are red flags or something that somebody's not doing okay, and that invites people to fill in the gap with their own whatever, with their own feelings, with their own concern. I definitely think somebody's emotions are triggering an emotional reaction in you. I think that is like totally something I believe. Are you feeling what the other person's feeling? Is my big question mark. Is
Well,
that
that's
actually happening?
impossible. I assume. So I'm projecting onto you what I imagine you're feeling based on what I see, what I think I see coming from you. Uh,
Yes.
but also like that is experientially 100% real. Like,
Yes.
do you know the experiment where they you put your hands in the thing and then they like stroke your hand and they stroke the fake hand? Do you know what one I'm talking about?
I think so.
Okay, so then like you think you're looking at a fake hand underneath the thing, but your hand is actually underneath that, right? And they stroke your hand and the fake hand at the same time. So you're looking at the fake hand and feeling the stroking that's not actually, and then they like, so you end up identifying with the hand, right?
Yes.
Even though it's not yours. And then they like, take a hammer and smash the hammer and it hurts your hand and you pull back immediately. I feel like that is the experience of me hearing a baby cry. Like it's actually happening to me, even though I know that it's not happening to me. And also I'm fully aware that, their experience is not the experience that I imagine. In the same way that, like, if I try to imagine, like, what it's like to be Black in America, like, I can imagine that, but that's not really what it's like to be Black in America. That's just, like, my imagination of it. That's my projection on them. But I still empathize. My experience is I'm experiencing being Black in America, even though I'm not.
That's interesting. That makes more sense to me than any other explanation I've heard.
Cool. I'm not even sure that explanation made sense to me. So I'm glad it was good for somebody.
Yeah, that does make sense, especially that hand thing. I think that probably is true. So you're both aware that you're identifying with this as if it's happening to you, but you're also aware that that's kind of an illusion. That's not really your hand. The hammer did not hit your hand. And not only did the hammer not hit your hand, but your reaction to the hammer is not the same as somebody else's reaction would be to the hammer. That makes sense to me. If people were, I mean, it's like what you say with being Black in America. Even though you could think, even though you in the moment are feeling your own feelings and being like, this is probably what it feels like, or, but actually experiencing it, you realize that's just you, like Black people are experiencing something different, largely because they're just different from you and they're different from each other. It's not this monolithic experience. I agree. I would say the one thing that seems a little bit weird to me about empathy while we're on this topic is that it seems to be making somebody else's thing about you a little bit. That's an interesting thing that I can see how that has positives and negatives. If you're making it about you, the truth is that we often think things that are about us are important. So suddenly that can clue your brain, your body, your everything into thinking, hey, this is really important. Let's ask this middle-aged woman, is she okay? With these kids. And then the other thing is, though, that seems like a weird thing, like especially in an emergency situation. You see somebody, having a seizure. I think a lot of people do kind of be like, man, what would that be like to have a seizure or something? And that's kind of where they are. Whereas I am not doing that. I'm like, okay, like put a wallet in his mouth or somebody call 911. Those are my reactions because I'm so little invested in even my own self that I don't tend to make things about me that are clearly just like external things happening to somebody else.
Well, so then a couple thoughts on that. So I just talked to a mortician, and so he's like has the job of like, in the case he was talking about, there was like a gunshot suicide, and so he was like having to sew up this person's head, and it was a friend of his, like somebody they knew, and so then he's talking about like, in the funeral, like how he's crying with over the loss and the family and stuff, but then when he's in that like body preparation mode, it's just like, all I can tell in my ignorant state, he's a psychopath when he's in there doing his thing, and he needs to be. Like, otherwise, he's not going to be able to make it through life as an empath in a body preparation job. So that's an important trait that I want. I want all of my EMTs and all of my first responders to not be empathetic. I don't want them feeling my pain. I want them to hear my pain, to know my list of symptoms, but I do not want them to feel with me. I want them to think what are the best procedures here.
Yeah. You don't want them to be like looking at the fake hand and thinking that's me,
Right.
You want them to be like, okay, somebody else's hand.
It's interesting to me, your perspective on empathy. If my empathy makes me feel the thing that you're feeling, that motivates me to want to relieve your pain because it is my pain now.
Yeah.
And that makes sense evolutionarily.
That makes sense to me too. And I can, just kind of like, I had a law professor who said, we can't trust rationality to make the really important decisions. We need to have some sort of emotional hook to get us to want to procreate, to get us to want to take care of the products of the procreation, the babies, to get us to want to like cooperate with each other. And so he was basically saying there are evolutionary reasons why we have emotional reactions to things, why we engage our emotions instead of just our rationality. And in fact, this is like, as a lawyer, this is like kind of trial advocacy, like 101, is that you can't rely on somebody's rational understanding of something to get them to the right answer. It's almost always the most reliable thing, this is again trial advocacy, is fear, is try to make people afraid of getting the wrong answer, what you want to kind of paint to them as the wrong answer. But yeah, if you're not engaging their emotions, I mean, I guess this is like presentation 101 too, like teaching or any sort of instructional thing where you're trying to trigger their emotions in some sort of way because it's somehow more salient, so I get that that's kind of like an evolutionarily driven thing, but there are a lot of evolutionarily driven things that we think, this is not just something we should take, wholesale, but like question a little bit. Like my body or I don't know if it's my body or my mind wants to eat a bunch of cookies all the time instead of vegetables, right? That's a craving for fats and for sugar, right? But I don't just be like, that's what the body wants.
Right. Well, I also feel like that's a modern invention. Like that has to do with the novelty of our current environment. I feel like emotions have developed more slowly and they are as relevant today, even though I feel like they're more easily manipulated. Like we've turned it into a tool against ourselves more in modern times.
So I will say, I'll push back a little bit about this idea, if you don't mind, if our emotional reactions are still pretty relevant. I would say probably not. And I say this just having finished the movie 13 Women, which was made in like, I think 1932 or 1933. And the villain in it is what they refer to as a, quote, half-breed, quote, half-caste, quote, etc. She is supposedly a Japanese / Indian woman, Hindu woman who has the ability to you also get like a femme fatale aspect to it because she's able to kind of seduce all these men into like including killing themselves. Spoiler alerts, hopefully. People have had a chance to watch 13 Women. But I just thought, there's something so interesting about especially the emotions that are related to our tribalism. I'm also so the plot of the movie, it must be like the original girl in high school gets bullied and gets revenge. It's basically like the Carrie of its time. But I'm also watching the season of Stranger Things where the girl gets bullied, L11, if anybody's seen it. And it's really triggering for me. For some reason, I get very triggered by seeing this kind of bullying behavior. And it's shocking in the Stranger Things, and it's shocking in 13 Women for me to see it. And it's shocking for me to see it when I see it, in these old videos of like Nazism or, what is it, the Arkansas 5 or the Arkansas 9, the little kids going, the desegregation of schools in the United States. Or every time I see it, I'm just disgusted. I have such a vivid reaction to it. And I think that's kind of the nice thing, actually, about having people like you, kind of generically, and then people like me, is that you're evolutionarily wired for certain things that tend to lead to good outcomes in certain situations, and I'm evolutionarily wired almost to be like a circuit breaker to some of this stuff. Like it's spinning around. Everybody's like, yeah, we hate this type of person. Let's do these terrible things because we're the same and they're different. And I was actually just reading the Wikipedia article for Half Caste, the word. And just kind of like running through all the different, like, how Wikipedia has like, here's how it's been used in Burma. Here's how it's been used in South Africa. And you're just horrified. You're horrified by the different ways that people have been excluded for being like of mixed race. Excluded on all sides, just like considered like the worst or whatever, like born into slavery essentially in South Africa. Et cetera, et cetera. And you, then like somebody like me comes in and is like, this seems weird, guys. Do you think we've gotten a little bit weird about this?
Like all of the worst things that have happened in the world. Well, yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and finish the sentence. I don't know if it's true or not, but they were all carried out by empaths. Like it was all people who had a story about how that person's not a real human, and so we get to treat them this way, and being psychopathic, but not knowing that they're being psychopathic. Like you've turned off your emotions towards it. You have given yourself a story that shuts down your emotions so you can carry out an action that you want to carry out. And you're not aware that you've turned off your emotions. You've put it all in emotional language so that it feels like this is emotional, even though it's not.
Well, I would say you haven't turned off your emotions. You've chosen some emotions over others, maybe. And I think that's like a very human thing. Last time we talked about emotional triggers. I just think it's different triggers. I love this idea that like you have a particular set of strengths and weaknesses. And then based almost entirely on luck, on like preparation meets opportunity, or really just kind of your genetic disposition and your background, it can either be good or bad. And that's what's interesting about this season of Stranger Things that I am watching. And I think that all the time about Winston Churchill, how he basically was like this washed up, essentially failed politician until appeasement, the British appeasement of the German, Nazi regime failed. Once appeasement failed, then it was like everybody's like, we have to take a different tact, but appeasement could have worked maybe. And then we wouldn't have Winston Churchill the way that we know him, right? And it's just like in certain situations, it's better, as you say, to have like the EMT people or the mortician not thinking and not dialing in, not choosing those emotions. And other situations, it's just like it's more context based than I think people understand. And actually, the fact that your society has psychopaths in it makes your society better. Because the more diversity there is in a society, that's the evolutionary push too, is to have a certain amount of diversity within a population. Let's say I was just reading about how in like a certain part of Asia, tigers are becoming melanistic. Like they have very dark coats, and it's almost like they don't have stripes in certain parts. It's all just dark, like it's all stripes. And they say it's because there's only like 30 tigers in that area, so they keep interbreeding, right? And why is that bad? Like we know that's bad for tigers to have them interbreeding. And we know that diversity is actually one of our strengths. But I think it's funny that people are like, diversity is a strength. And that's why, we are multicultural or try to embrace multiculturalism, but psychopaths no. There's no strengths to psychopaths.
Yeah, well, and I've got to agree with you too that like if I take a look at my species and take a look at the worst characteristics, like what's our next stage of evolution? It probably has to do with like getting rid of some of this ape-ish tribalism of like wanting to kill other people just because they're not like us. That seems to be doing a lot of damage right now, whether it's in a religious context or otherwise. And so like it feels like the next step is less of that thing, which probably means less testosterone. It probably means like biochemically, it means taking away a lot of the things, a lot of the impulsive emotions that we have and making everything just a little bit chiller. And so like, I feel like as a me, I don't want that future. I like my passions. I like the thing. But if you asked an ape, 2 million years ago, like, hey, how about we turn you into this hairless thing and you can like play the politics game? They'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm an ape. This is great like this. But like, if we're going to make it farther, we're probably going to have to give up a lot of the things that we really love. And I think that probably emotions, especially impulsive actions based on emotions, is the next thing to give up if we're going to do this well. And I don't want that to be in my lifetime, because I want to die like this. But for the future generations, it seemed like that has to be somewhere along the lines. Someone's got to stop dropping bombs if we're going to make it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting. Social cohesion feels really good, to people, but there's something about people who aren't psychopaths where social cohesion almost like there's very much a dark side to it. Like, because if you're socially cohesive with your group, then there's almost like this inherent, but not this other person. This person's not a part of the group. There's such an in-group, out-group tendency that comes from this evolutionary tribalism thing, I think. It's just what I've observed in normal people. So that's the thing that freaks me out the most. That's like my biggest fear is mob mentality. If you go back and read like my blog or whatever, like that's the thing that I'm most afraid of is groups of people.
Absolutely. That makes sense. I think one of the things that is most troubling, especially from my former community, about psychopaths is there's this belief, this really deep needed belief that there's no way to have morality without all of the things that we would have called spirit or soul that are really emotions. And so if you could have a community of psychopaths that was moral, a lot of that belief system breaks down.
This is interesting. I'm not familiar. What is your former community?
Evangelical fundamentalist Christians.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. And it is interesting, like, I think we talked about this last time, the idea of what makes somebody human. I think the idea of what makes something moral is really interesting. Like, that's another thing I don't have as a psychopath, even like post-therapy. I do not have moral reasoning. And so I'm kind of like, I'm like as clueless about it, like big question mark, as I am about the idea that people are experiencing, the emotions of somebody else. I just think I see that there seems to be something kind of moving there. I don't know it and understand it, but I can also kind of think, so I've used as almost like a prosthetic moral compass, the idea of efficiency. And also like a Jeremy Bentham utilitarianism. Like generally speaking, they're the same actually, efficiency and utilitarianism, because you're just trying to do the thing that works best for other people. And that, I mean, as a lawyer, especially now that I've moved away from litigation and do mostly like transactional work, it's just negotiations. And I remember one of my earlier mentors, told me like, Jamie, we don't want to like shove things down their throats. Like, this is the beginning of a relationship that we hope to invest in and keep. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. All right, we're not
Yeah.
trying to shove things down people's throats. And so that sort of stuff makes sense to me. Like, you don't have to have right and wrong, I think, added to this in order for me to be like, yeah, we're not shoving things down people's throats. We're being cooperative.
That sentence speaks for itself. Yeah. That is the troubling part, because the belief in that system is if you leave that system, then you have no more morality. And obviously the argument against that is what you're saying. There's other reasons to be moral other than the book told me to.
Yeah, exactly. So this is something that I've told people, I actually think this is a good analogy, for people are like, oh, how could you possibly not just want to kill people if you don't have empathy? And I was like, that would be like, I actually use Christians. I would be like, that would be like you're a Christian and you're like, thou shalt not kill. And then you decide, you know what, maybe I'm agnostic. And then you just go on a killing spree. Like, clearly thou shalt not kill is not the only reason.
But they
you
think
are
that it
killing.
is. They really do. They really
And
do.
that troubles me.
That troubles me too. I think those people should stay Christians.
I'm like, shoot, wow, okay, is there anything we can do to encourage you to keep going to church if that's the only thing keeping you from not killing people? But I also think people ask me this too all the time. It's so weird. They focus almost on the lack of impediments to doing something. They're like, if you don't feel like guilty, for instance, about stuff, then why wouldn't you just go like around killing people? And I ask, and for what would I do? Why am I spending money and time hunting people down to kill them? Like, what would be the value in that to me? Why would that ever be something I choose to do instead of watching Stranger Things and eating popcorn at night?
Yes, it sounds like a lot more work. Yeah.
It's so weird. But I guess if you're hyper focused on things like that you can't do, that I don't know.
Well,
yeah, it does seem to lead to weird kind of reasoning in their minds.
Before I was aware that people, so Patrick Gagney was my first introduction to like an out sociopath.
Shut up, Patrick. Hey, Patrick.
Do you know Patrick?
Well, we worked on the nonprofit Psychopathy is then rebranded to the Society for the Prevention of Disorders of Aggression. I think we're both on the board of advisors for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So like before I ran into any of that, it troubled me that like, because I was reading all the stuff that I could on psychopathy, but it was all centered on inmates, as far as I could tell. And I was like, if they did a study on like people named Jamin and they only study the people who are in jail named Jamin, like of course people are going to hate the Jamins. Like, excuse me, this is not representative. So it was such a breath of fresh air for me to like find that like someone else was like, hey, maybe those aren't the examples of what it necessarily means to be psychopathic. And I obviously like it seems like if you do have a taste for human flesh or whatever, then you're going to be helped by not having empathy. So I understand like the conflation of them if you haven't thought about it too deeply. But even before I was introduced to people who thought about it deeply, it seemed problematic that was everyone's introduction to psychopathy is like, look at these murderers. Like, okay, well, you're studying murderers, so that's what you're going to see.
Yeah. And just kind of speak a little bit about like the violence, let's say, with regard, or the criminality with regard to psychopaths. It is true that psychopaths do not have the same breaks, like I do think morality, empathy, they do act as like a brake on like acting in a particular way. And since psychopaths don't have those, they don't have the same breaks. But it doesn't mean they don't have other breaks, number one. They have like other breaks that you don't have maybe, or they've been built up or whatever. in the lack of conscientiousness, ethics, like efficiency, all these can be kind of different things that are inherent to the way a psychopath operates. Number one. Number two, though, kind of speaking to this idea of violence and psychopaths, you're right. Do you know what the word confounding variable means?
I've heard it before.
Yeah, it's basically just a variable that like is underneath the thing, so we might think like football players tend to be, just male, they tend to be male. But is it the maleness? Is it like the actual XY chromosome, or is it the testosterone? If you gave women testosterone from birth, would they also become a football player? That sort of thing is interesting to me. So good example of this, and you kind of mentioned it. It's like if you're just studying in a jail and prison situation, everybody named Jamin. Is it Jamin? No, the underlying variable is jail. You're in a prison. That's the confounding variable. So this is something interesting that, I will, in all kind of academic honesty, suggest is just pure arithmetic. I haven't done like actual statistical anything. But if you are willing to cherry pick a little bit in this area, and you have two people who, one of them, let's say they're both blank people. You make one of them male and you make one of them psychopath. The maleness is more violent than the psychopath. The male one is more violent statistically, if you kind of do this. And I think it's a really interesting question that somebody who's like better at statistics and willing to kind of like, use, the problem is you're mixing data sets in this. And so that's why I put a bunch of hedge, but it's very close. And in fact, if you cherry pick, you can make it so that the maleness predicts more violence than the psychopath. So you can kind of imagine, is it psychopath that's violent? Is it psychopath who's criminal? Or number one, is it the selection bias of only studying criminals? Number two, is it something else? Is it maleness that's the violence? Is it, lower socioeconomic background, which is also strongly correlated with psychopathy? Is there like something that is common to psychopaths that's actually kind of causing this, that it's not the psychopathy itself, it's something else? So I think we just, as we, talked about last time, we're very complex humans. There's like I think during the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, even into there, it was very common to think, oh, cool, brain scans. Now we'll know everything. But the brain is so complex that we can take a look at it, but it's almost like just taking a look at, I don't know, like a photo of a whale and then feeling like you understand all there is to know about whales. It's like, okay. So I just think that there's a lot more kind of going on in normal people and psychopaths. Like there's so many weird things that we experience because we're in bodies, we have brains, and then we have this separate thing that's like consciousness on top of it. And for thousands of years, we haven't been able to figure it out. And so if people say that they have the answer, I'm like, okay, but it's probably really a complex answer, right? It probably changes from moment to moment even.
Well, and you mentioned like socioeconomic status. Like it seems to me plainly evident that what you are forced to deal with affects your situational perspective on that. Like we're talking about the mortician guy. Like when he steps into that room to prepare the body, I think, and I didn't ask him about this, but I think he becomes a different human. Like I think there's a switch that flips in him, and that in that context, he is necessarily psychopathic. It used to be that like an undertaker would like do all the jobs, right? And so but anymore, like with the industrialization and stuff, there's some people that just do that. Like they just prepare the body, then you pass them off to someone else who just does the funeral planning or whatever. I imagine if you spend 8 hours a day just preparing bodies, that does something to your head. And I don't even mean that in a negative sense. I just mean you become a different person. And so you're constantly in this context of this thing. And you might, when you step out the door, forget to flip the switch back on. Mm-hmm. And that seems like that you could accidentally be psychopathic to a lot of people, just accidentally. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to care because like I've been spending the last 8 hours not caring for my own self-preservation.
I almost like that balance. I like kind of flipping with the switch a little bit, playing with the switch, trying to like put it in the middle with stuff. I like to think of myself as like a skeleton, like a walking skeleton, to feel my skin just resting on my skull. Like to me, there's reality there, and even the idea that you would have to flip a switch, like, can't we kind of like combine it? Can't we be both? That's how I am. Because to me, it's like your left eye sees something different than your right eye does. And we don't really see like the well with just one eye or the other. To me, we see best when we use the information and we have to reconcile the data coming from one and the other. But in that reconciliation is when we find the depth truly of vision and of our visual world. And so I like to think, there are like different perspectives, even this perspective of the people who are like, the Bible says this or whatever, that is enriching our world and our species, because they have this different perspective that is, something's going to come along, perhaps statistically it's possible, and so it will happen, as we keep going out into time, where they're the best at it. They're gonna be the best, whatever the thing is. So as kind of like, it may be troubling to deal with them in other situations, but just knowing we have to kind of keep these guys in our toolbox, because eventually they're gonna be the right fit for the problem that comes up.
I think that's how we got here. Like I think the religion, and my atheist friends hate me for this, but I really think that the fact that it is so prevalent tells us something about its evolutionary fitness.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I mean, there was someone who's, the magic guy in the sky saying, hey, you need to make lots of babies at a time where it's a ridiculous idea to make any babies at all, because life is suffering. Like you need the big guy to be saying, no, you have to make babies. That's the only way to make me happy. I could totally see that like playing out, and that being what got us here. Otherwise, everyone would have been like, we can't keep doing this. Everybody stop with the babies already.
On the flip, I actually think that babies are sort of like a multi-level marketing scheme, in which the more that you have underneath you, the more you kind of benefit. You have all these like people below you that are kind of contributing back up, back up. And I wonder if that's also kind of driving it, people who had so many kids, like, is it just God, or is it because they're like, well, and I've run into this, with some of my friends who are like a little bit older, and they didn't have kids, and it's like, they're a little bit screwed,
I mean, this is a modern problem because you didn't have choices before. So yeah, if you want to do the deed, then you're going to have kids, and so you got to put up with them. And sure, like it works out. Then you have people to work the farm or whatever. But the choice is is extremely modern thing.
Yeah, and it's weird to think of it in moral terms. Totally weird. To have babies or not to have, like, slapping morality onto that. I'm like, does this feel like it fits to you guys? Or does it feel like maybe this is not a moral issue?
All right. So then, can we talk about Mormonism?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you currently a practicing Mormon?
Yes, I go to church.
Okay. Do you believe that it's true?
There's something about it that's true, but it's not like I have to have it be 100% true to me. I even think in the falsehoods, maybe, because there have been certain things that they've just rolled back, where they used to say this and didn't, and now they say something different. I think there's something about like the process of finding truth. My kind of understanding, can I get like super religious with you for a hot second?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's where I'm comfortable.
So I got kind of obsessed like 2 years ago with like the scripture. I don't remember where it is, where it says, let me try to think how it starts. Take my yoke upon you, like something, something, something. And then Jesus says, and he gives us his credentials, for I am meek and lowly of heart. So he's basically saying, like, stop the thing that you're doing and instead yoke up with me. And to kind of like incentivize us to be like, okay, we trust you, Jesus. He says, for I am meek and lowly of heart. And like, why does he give those as his credentials? Was like the question that I asked myself for a really long time. And I ended up kind of coming, it's still a question. I still think about it. But I think, like a big part of the answer is what he's saying when he says, for I am meek and lowly of heart, is he is saying, I am in reality. And also, he's saying, I can meet you where you are. He's saying both those things. Like, I'm in reality. I don't need to have reality be any different. And I can meet you where you are because the reality of where you are is reality. Where you are is part of reality. And I think that's why he kind of gives it as the credentials. Then I started thinking that's kind of weird. And like my intuition, whom I consulted, was like, yeah, that's basically it. Said, this is what it is that this idea of meeting reality where it is and meeting other people where they are is essentially what he's saying by saying he's meek and lowly of heart. Then I started thinking, does some of his like kind of power, let's say, and authority come from that? Is if he's saying this, then it kind of suggests it's almost like saying like, and I have a PhD, you can trust me. And it's like bragging or whatever. It's a credential because he had to learn and do some things to get the PhD or something. It kind of sets him apart from other people who don't have that same power and authority. So then I started thinking about like, okay, let me try to like meet reality where it is. Let me see if there's like an increased amount of power. And I think even just in physics, we understand that there is. Like if you're meeting something like exactly where it is, you are tracking it so closely. Like there's no slippage there. You are like, if you wanted to like, lift something heavy or something, like the best position to be in is like perfectly in reality, like perfectly gripping the place that you're going to be. So for me, when you think about like theology historically and all these people, are they all just trying to meet reality where it is? The reality of like their existence, the reality of where they came from, the reality of where they're going. And I think that's it, right? And we have like these scriptures too that say that Jesus is like the light and the truth, right? And I think in some ways it's literal because he's right there at reality. He has become one with reality because he's constantly there in reality all the time. Not that he is reality necessarily, like all of reality. He just is there, like in reality as much as you could possibly be in reality. When I think about that and this quest that everybody's on for truth and the fact that kind of reality changes all the time, then I think it makes sense that things have changed. It makes sense that our concepts have changed about like the way, even like the way we think about women, like in the Bible, there's like a condonement of slavery or sometimes even a commandment of slavery, all these things that just kind of are troubling. They're troubling to my soul, and into Mormonism too. You still get the same like polygamy. That's troubling to my soul. And not just the women, but for the men and the children. You read so many instances. Like I have some of my ancestors, polygamous ancestors, the children suffered, as a result of it. And you just think, what was going on? Like, why would anyone ever kind of think to do this? But I think it's just this struggle to try to. It's almost like you take a globe, like a sphere that the globe is, and you try to put it on a two-dimensional map. I think that's what we're always kind of doing. And if you focus on Japan, it looks so much different than if you focus on South Africa. If you center South Africa in the globe, it looks terribly different than if you center, Alaska or do what we usually do, the middle of the Atlantic, like here's the equator right smack in the middle or something. And they're all accurate representations and inaccurate. They're kind of both. And so I think of like Mormonism as being kind of this like science fiction-y type thing more than I think it is like this strictly spiritual type thing.
So you were deep into ayahuasca and shoulders and
yeah. And so I just went through 20 different things that something would kind of come to my mind, like this is something that I can tell I still feel like emotional about, like have an emotional trigger. And one of them was interesting because I had just, I'm like writing a second book. And I had like 2 weeks before the ayahuasca, I had been writing out the story again. And I could tell that it bothered me. It was the story of like when I was a sophomore in high school, I get appendicitis. And I went for 10 days with my appendix ruptured. And when I finally was taken to the hospital, my parents wouldn't take me to the doctor because they didn't have medical insurance. So they were trying all these like different things. They took me to my grandpa who was a chiropractor and all these different things. They were like, we think you have a torn muscle from softball. I was like, I just don't think that that's what it is. And the night before I went to the doctor finally, I was like, just like sweating, my whole abdominal area was swollen and just like felt miserable. When I went to the doctor the next morning, they did a blood work. They came back. The white blood cell counts were like crazy. They knew it was an infection. It was so high that the nurse looked at me and she's like, are you okay? Do you want to sit down? And I said, no, I'm fine. And then I like promptly passed out. I just like crumpled. So then like I woke up, I'm in a wheelchair. They're like wheeling me out. They wanted to call the ambulance, but my parents convinced them, again, because they don't want to pay for it. They convinced them, no, like the hospital's just like 3 minutes away. It's going to be faster if we actually just get her in the car and drive her now. So that's kind of what ended up happening. Emergency appendectomy. I was in the hospital for like 8 days. Like in the ayahuasca, like I understood that was much more traumatic than I had like allowed myself to experience. And that was like a very, like an inflection point in my life where I realized I couldn't rely on my parents even to like keep me alive. And so I thought, why am I still carrying, and it bothered me too. The 2 weeks before when I was writing about it, it bothered me to not remember what exact age I was. And I was like, oh no, I'm forgetting. And I remember thinking that, oh no, I'm forgetting, as if this was like something to cherish, some cherished memory to hold on to forever. And so I wrote it all out again, as much as I could remember so I wouldn't kind of forget type thing. It was like this weird waste of time, like why am I spending my time writing about this? I've even written about it before, like in the first book. But in the ayahuasca, I realized, okay, this is like something that like I've been giving my blood supply to, my emotional energy kind of blood supply to. And I thought, does it make any sense to still have it here now that I understand this is kind of the root of some of my issues, And it was the root of such weird issues. During the ayahuasca, I had a hard time breathing, like in certain states of consciousness. I would stop breathing. And that was like such a weird thing for me to realize. And in like my experience, I came to understand that some of it came from like the shock of the incision of the appendectomy. This is like at least what my brain told me. Like you got cut into, and then like that was so shocking to the body that the body was like almost hyperfixated on like the abdomen and like trying to then like breathe from the abdomen instead of like breathing in my lungs, trying to like just expand back into my back or whatever. So it was like clearly like a weirdly pivotal time, but even it being a pivotal time, can it get off the shoulders and can it just go to my brain? So I worked on that, and that actually was quick. It was quicker than you think, but the ayahuasca kind of helps because there's such like a sense of non-judgmentalness. But it's so interesting too because you're like, is it the ayahuasca that has the sense of non-judgmentalness, or is it me? Is it Jamie? And the ayahuasca is just helping me to kind of see, because the ayahuasca is essentially just like a mirror. Is the ayahuasca just helping me to see that I'm less judgmental than I think, even about my own stuff, about other people's stuff? And so it's just so much easier to forgive.
There's so much about us that is just the attempt to make your current self, your current narrative, match up with your past narratives. Like you owe something to your past self. And you're trying to, okay, but I believe this and I believe this and I believe this. So now what can I currently believe that incorporates all that? Like if you just let that go, there's just so you don't owe anything to your past self. You can just change your mind. You could be wrong about it, or you could change your mind and be wrong about changing your mind. Like that's all allowed in the human experience. And I feel like those altered states of consciousness give you that like detachment from all of that other stuff where you're trying to hold yourself together. But what am I? What is my identity? And instead of just like accepting, like we were talking about, like what is reality? Forget what my
Yeah.
identity is, what I thought my identity was. What's reality? And what do I currently want? What do I currently believe? What do I currently need?
Yeah. The conscious mind is such a storyteller. It loves to tell stories. It will tell stories about anything. Loves to tell stories about how you're justified or they're not justified or whatever. And I think that's what kind of bothers me about moral reasoning too, is it seems to come from this storytelling. There's something about like the moral reasoning that freaks me out a little bit when I see it in others. Admittedly, when I see it, I'm like, uh-oh, is this about to get weird? That's honestly my reaction.
So then what does the beginning of that look like? Because I think it's so integrated into my life that I wouldn't even recognize moral reasoning when I saw it.
I think moral reasoning, I even think, speaking about this movie, 13 Women, I think one of the reasons for miscegenation laws was moral reasoning, was just like there's this idea of like something being caste, which is race, and then, half caste, which is like this impure, like this in between thing that's more difficult. And it talked about this Wikipedia article about half caste was talking about British imperialism. It was so much easier to just be like there are white people and there are non-white people, and the white people are in charge and the non-white people aren't in charge. And then once you start to go beyond binaries, because the world and reality is complex, it just opens up like a can of worms. Now you have to answer like a million other questions. So often I think moral reasoning comes in as like the conscious mind's cheat, to making its life easier. It's lazy. Like your brain is lazy. Your conscious mind's even lazier, and it wants to like not work. It doesn't want to have to like see everything that's happening. It wants to just pretend as if, none of that exists. And I think that is the troubling thing about moral reasoning is it seems to have such pronounced blind spots. You're like, okay, sure, that looks kind of like, it's like a child's drawing of a zebra. That's what it's like versus like the actual zebra that you're touching, That's what it seems like.
It feels like there's you have an intuition that you don't want to admit, and then so you're looking for a narrative to make that like two dudes together, like that's yucky, like that I don't like the feel of that, and so but I do like the feel of that, and I find that part of me yucky. But either one of those, like there's something about like boo gay, and so then like but I'm not allowed to say boo gay, so then like I need a verse or a god or a someone to tell me that that's not as okay, that they agree with me that it's as gross as I think it is, so that I can say what I really wanted to say, but it's not really me. I'm just this is morality, or then you try to like maybe say, well, it's because of, marriage should be about procreation, like all these other stories that we pile on top. Like when you pick one apart, the other one that shows up, like that seems like that's hiding something that's underneath of it, which is like, but I just don't really like them, and I want permission to not like them.
Yeah.
You know?
I think too, stuff kind of gets changed for really reasons of convenience in the moment, because it doesn't fit the narrative of like imperialism. So stuff kind of gets enshrined or changed or whatever. And then it's almost like they kind of forget what was the real reason.
Yeah. So then I have to imagine too that like some of that, maybe a large percentage of it, is also like terror management too, which is like why we, would sacrifice a virgin to the gods to help with the crops. And, we've sacrificed the virgin and the crops didn't grow, but, maybe that's because they weren't really a virgin, or maybe we need to sacrifice two, or like the fact that it doesn't work doesn't seem to ever dissuade us from trying it again. And so like, I would rather take two of the virgins in my community and sacrifice them than face the fact that stuff is random and crops don't always grow. I can't deal with that. And so better to do the other uncomfortable alternative of paying all these prices.
Yeah, I will say that, but I will also say that like I did like a little bit, not a ton, of research into the Reformation and like Martin Luther and some of his translation choices, let's say. And he would add stuff, and there's a letter of him talking about this and being like, I added this, and if anybody says, hey, that word wasn't really in it, and then, questions it, let it be known Martin Luther willed it to be so. I was like, oh, okay. Where I think, and then we lose the plot, or like the 1946, like the word homosexual did not exist in the Bible until like 1946 when they added it. And then unfortunately, like a lot of these people who are just reading the Bible are like, it's in the Bible, but they don't realize that somebody made a choice, so, like decades ago or centuries ago or millennia ago. And they just made a choice. And the thing that you're basing your moral world on is just their choice. Martin Luther willed it to be so. And I think that's the hard thing with moral reasoning is it's not really tracking reality. And then I think if it's not tracking reality, what's the point of it? Especially if you believe Jesus is in reality.
Well, it's tracking certainty, and that is sometimes more comfortable than truth. Not sometimes; it's usually more comfortable than truth. So I think there's some people who just prefer that, and they're okay with that. And again, like in the same way that like they can't say that in the same way that a lot of people can't say gay yuck or gay yay, and they're just not comfortable with their own reaction to it. I think a lot of people are just not comfortable admitting I would rather have a lie than uncertainty. And so they act as if they believe that because they really do believe that, but it's a subconscious choice. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I like about the movie Memento, though. He makes the choice on screen. I'm going to lie to myself.
I think a lot of us do that. So I've got questions then. At some point in your life, you were like the least empathetic. You had the least amount of self identity, right?
Mhm.
What age was that, and what did you think about morality and religion then, or did you?
I would say that I don't remember having like a sense of self as a child or something and then losing it. Sometimes you talk to psychopaths where they kind of think that they had more of a sense of self, not me. And so I kind of think like it probably kind of mostly never developed. In fact, maybe even was earlier because I have kind of a theory that if the psychopath is more narcissistic, that whatever disruption in identity happened later. Maybe when they're, I don't know, even 3 months old, 1 year old, 2 years old, or whatever, because it's almost like they have like a vestigial sense of self in their
Yeah,
narcissism.
right. Okay.
Like a primordial whatever sense of self, like the start of a sense of self in their narcissism. But for me, no. And so that continued until like therapy, until like my mid-30s, the lack of sense of self. What was your other question about it?
When were you farthest away from caring about having a sense of self, and what was different about the way you thought about morality or religion at that point than now?
Yeah, the farthest away was what I call the playground stage, and it seems like every psychopath enjoys the playground stage for a while, and you're like Teflon, nothing really matters, and the fact that you can't take anything personally is like the best thing ever because I mean you could be in jail and then like the next day just as if it never happened. There's no past, there's no future, there's just life in the moment. It's like it's not even hedonism. It's more like this phenomenological expression of existence.
Yeah, an ever-presentness, perhaps, like all that exists is this moment.
Yeah, really, it's like total tunnel vision about things, but in like this like way that is, speaking of, having like past things kind of haunt you or whatever, it's totally unhaunted. There are no ghosts here and there. I mean, that's not really true because if you do run into people, then you're like, oh shoot, like you have an acknowledgement like this person's not going to be happy to see me or something. But it's almost like so out of sight, out of mind. It's totally compartmentalized out of your mind. And there's definitely no moral reasoning. I mean, I still don't use moral reasoning. I almost think like I would have to like study for like 12 years or something to learn moral reasoning like most people have it because you guys probably did it for 12 years. Think about it. From like when you were whatever 3 and people started telling you good, bad, until whatever. So I'd have so much to catch up on because all that stuff just like over my head. It's almost like you guys were, like, speaking Mandarin. And that's what it sounds like to me. I'm kinda like, "Okay."
So I want to for several of these questions then like just hone in on that version of Jamie.
Yep.
Okay, so then that Jamie, what are some of the movies that she enjoyed, or did she enjoy movies?
Um, I did like movies. I liked movies a lot to understand people's motivations, and it's not like I thought the movie was realistic. I thought the movie is a portrayal of how people sort of, let's say, romanticize life. The way that they kind of how this is such an interesting thing that I think back to a lot. I was doing my resume and everything was equal spacing. Then my friend looked at it and she's like, "This looks closer. The heading looks closer to this than it does to the other thing because just the way it was all kind of organized." And I said, "Actually, it's equal spacing." And she said, "Well, it doesn't really matter if it's equal spacing. It
Yeah.
looks closer."
Uh-huh.
So that then I adjusted it and she's like, "Yeah, now it looks right," or whatever. And so that's what movies were to me. It's like what looked right, to people, the relationship dynamics that looked right to people. And there really are expressions, I think, of the time in which they were created, even if they're period pieces. They're like oddly, like Gone with the Wind, the original is like it's a period piece, but it's also like a period piece for us to watch what they thought the Civil War looked like during that time period to a certain sort of population. So I thought of that more like with movies, art stuff. It was more like and it's like a very shallow existence, to just kind of think this is just how what people like now. Like for instance, when I was a music major, I learned about nationalism in the 19th century, with like composers like the Czech composer Smetana or some of the Russian composers like the big ones, Tchaikovsky, all these guys. Uh very nationalistic, right? And think, oh, nationalism, what a weird thing, and now we're nationalistic again, and just kind of realizing, okay, there's something about this that people vibe with, like through the centuries. And that's how I experienced music too. It's just kind of like this idea, like, huh, interesting that this was popular to somebody, at one time. So yeah, that's how I mostly thought about things. It's not like I've never had sadism. I've never really experienced, like, bloodlust, and I actually kinda think with regard to some psychopaths, speaking of they don't have the same breaks as normal people do. If I had sadism, or bloodlust, that would be, like, really burdensome, It would be kind of like, the pedophilia thing where you have this thing where that's just happens to be your natural inclination. And, in my mind, that's neither good nor bad, but definitely if you harm a child, you have harmed that child. That is what has happened. Despite your struggle, you still, in my mind, are expected to live in a way that minimizes harm to others, and if you can't do that, if you can't be trusted to be around other people, then we're going to have to put you somewhere where you're not around other people, where you're not around people that you can harm. And that's kinda my moral reasoning or whatever. That's how I always thought of it, like and if I can kinda channel, some of my differences in better ways, then that's better for everybody, like, I'm still kind of getting the thing that I need and, not getting other things. Speaking of certainty, young Jamie too really wanted to know everything. And part of it, like, manifested in, like, watching people, in kinda, like, creepy ways, like sneaking into their houses, while they're away, like, going through their stuff. And my psychopathic girlfriend, she still watches me. Like, if she comes home, she'll spend, like, a minute or 2 just watching me through the window. She says she loves watching, especially when the other person doesn't know. But the interesting thing about it, I asked her about this recently, like, is it about the lack of consent? Do you, like, kind of like the fact and she said no. That, like, if I said, "Please don't do that anymore," she would stop or whatever. It's not at all about the consensualness. It's like, I could say, "You're okay to watch me whenever you want." She would still have just as much pleasure because I wouldn't know when it's happening. And so it's like I'm unguarded, I'm acting in a way that is like unaware that I'm being observed or something.
That feels like
So
reading someone's diary or something. Like
yes.
just I'm not like looking for any angle or anything, but like what is this human like really?
Yes, and in fact, that's one of, like, the things that I got in trouble with most, and it was in college, so I was old enough to kind of, like, get a little blackballed, is we were on tour together, European tour. One of my friends who was also in my program, she was dating this dude, I was kinda like, "He's going on a Mormon mission, this is not gonna last," or something, and so true to form, I was like, "Let's just cut to the chase and be like, hey, I think he's cheating on you, just try to get rid of him," because I was like, I don't wanna have to kinda deal with the drama of hearing about this guy all the time. And, she kinda, like, cut me out of her life a little bit, right? And then but we're on tour together, and we just happened to be sitting next to each other. I don't remember who sat where first or something, but we were kind of across from each other, and everybody kinda kept the same places on the bus for, like, these 3.5 weeks or something that we were on tour, 4 weeks maybe. And, with a musical group, one of the BYU musical groups, and she left the bus. I had seen her, like, writing it in her diary. I knew it's in her backpack. She left the bus to go, like, play hacky sack of all things, and so I thought, "Oh, perfect opportunity to read her diary and see, like, what she's been writing about me." I'm, like, reading, find nothing really interesting, look out, notice she's not, like, playing hacky sack anymore, think, "Uh-oh." So I quickly, like, throw the diary back in the backpack. I get up and she's already walking towards me. I'm like, "How can I kinda play this off?" So I kind of, like, jostle with her, like, a little bit, like, friendly. She laughs, and I thought, actually, I if this was the solution for me to, like, kind of make amends with the friendship, this is, like, simpler than I thought it was gonna be. Like, I didn't have to read the diary, but then when she gets back to her seat and notices the diary's out and she's like, "It's gotta have been Jamie who did it," then that was, like, for sure the end. Then she, like, looked at me kind of like, "How could you do this?" Like, you some of your meddling before was, like, this level and, didn't appreciate it, but now you have, like, lost my trust forever.
Did you get it? Were you like, yeah, fair enough? Or was it like
Mm.
why would you be upset about that?
No, I did understand, it's, like, totally non-consensual and, kind of, like, honestly creepy too, like, somebody who's, like, said, "Hey, let's not be as close friends," like, "We can be cordial to each other and friendly, but I don't wanna, like, hang out with you anymore." Uh, like, why are you why are you reading my diary? If that's the thing that I've, like, asked you kindly to do. So then after that, though, in the program, that's kind of when I was like, wow, I am kind of playing with fire with some of these emotional things because she must have told somebody. It just felt like everything was, like, really chilly afterwards. It was like everybody was fine with me, but nobody was, like, even that friendly with me.
This feels related in my mind, but I don't know why. Do you feel like sociopaths, psychopaths are better at spotting other psychopaths than empaths?
Some people are. Some psychopaths have kind of like gaydar for psychopaths. I can do it if I hear them say something that's, like, almost like a clue, and I think this is pretty common for psychopaths to kind of, like, say kinda clue-ish things, like, say something that everybody thinks is sarcastic, like, "I wouldn't know because I'm a psychopath." I mean, like, psychopaths actually say stuff like that.
So does every stand-up comedian I can think of too, and I wonder if that's like if there's a crossover there or
I would definitely say there's, like, probably what, 50% of stand-up comedians are, like, psychopathic, let's say, have, like, a
they all have a thing that like I feel like it's well known that like within that industry, like you're only funny if there's something really wrong with you because you're looking at the world a very different way, and so you get to
yeah.
say the things that no one else knows that they think, but they do think, and when you say it, they're like, "Oh crap, I think that. That's hilarious." Um, do you find psychopaths to be funnier than empaths?
Yeah, probably, like, because empaths, let's admit it, aren't usually funny. Like like the average empath, I'm not like, "Ha ha ha, he is so funny," or whatever. It's like rare that that would ever happen. And I think like psychopaths have at least interesting observations, which even if they're not trying to be funny, there's something funny about hearing them like voice these things.
It's like looking at the world like from a different dimension or something like that. Like just seeing underlying realities that you wouldn't have that were hidden to you because of all
And
the
that was like
whatever.
a really big hit in the 80s and 90s for sitcoms, right? Perfect Strangers, that Balky guy who was from a uh-huh, or like Third Rock from the Sun, like it's hilarious. Alf.
Do you feel like you relate to those people? Like I'm watching a different species.
Yeah, I love those shows. Those shows were all my favorite. Like, there's a reason why it was easy for me to come up with those names of those shows. Like, I had one of my kind of friends, like a little bit paramour, once was like, you're just like an alien, Jamie.
Did you feel like that?
Yeah, especially when she said it. It was like, "Oh my gosh, that is, like, such a good way to put it." And I actually felt really seen. That was one of the reasons why I was, like, attracted to her, like, as a friend, potential paramour, is I thought, "Wow, she has picked up on this thing that a lot of people don't even bother to try to connect the dots on." And I think that's what's so interesting too about, like, psychopaths who kinda drop these hints or whatever. I think there is, like, a desire to be seen, have it's almost like they're like sending out like little radar signals for, for somebody to kind of pick up on and be like, "Hey," In fact, I think like the funniest little story involves me like realizing that because I always knew I was different, but I didn't know what I was called sociopath. So it wasn't until I was in law school, I was doing this internship I shared an office with this other person, and we didn't have like enough work, but we had to stay there from 9 to 5. Like we had FaceTime requirements, but like only worked like a few hours a day. So we're like chit chatting most of the time after weeks and weeks of just chit chatting about everything. And she was like one of these people that like, like I don't have good personal boundaries, especially back then. And she definitely didn't. So we just talked about like the most intimate, non-normie things. And then after weeks of this, she was like, "You may want to consider the possibility that you're a sociopath." So I look it up and I'm like, "Oh, yeah." Okay, this seems like sociopath or something. But like that sort of like being seen where somebody was willing to like take the kind of connect the dots is it's nice because most of the time people don't even want to see that so much that you just kind of mask. And you mask in like this like gentle way that's almost just like politeness, like the way that you would like even if you're kind of angry or something, and even if you didn't like the service at your restaurant, you say thank you so much or whatever, because you're like people don't wanna deal with the full me, all of my emotions right now. This little interaction with the restaurant server doesn't warrant that, and so I'm just gonna keep it to what it is, and it's like that for everything, though. It's like that for your relationships, your family relationships even, and, you get so sick of masking all the time and not having, like, anybody understand that you are different, that yeah, when that one woman was like, "You're like an alien," I was like, "My heart."
Well, and that was one of the things in your book that I like. One of the parts that stood out was like the recognition that like that desire to be seen, to be known, to be understood. Like that's just the common human thing, and I feel like sociopaths make such a study of that, of like, oh, here's the face that I need to make, and here's the way that I'm supposed to touch your arm, and like how do I make you feel all the feelings that make you feel seen and heard, and all the whatever that is. And it's like a manipulation of this game, and yet there's also that same desire in you, maybe in a different dimension or something, but like it's still the same, which makes, frankly, the part of like the manipulation the most troubling part for me. Like I'm cool with like the illegal acts, but the part where like it seems inevitable that if I was in that position, I would make a study of, okay, what are these people doing, and like, what do I need? How do I do my eyes in order to, like, what's the concern thing that they're doing? How do I make concern happen here? And then, like, it would feel like a sport, I would imagine, or something like that.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick example, of something that happened just a couple days ago. I was talking to somebody. I was my first time back at church after being gone for my surgery. And she had been following up with me, and she's supposed to like minister to me. It's called like ministering sister. And she's like, "I'm so sorry, Jamie. Like, you totally fell off my radar. But my grandmother died." And at first I understood that in context of she's telling, or her grandmother didn't die. She fell and broke her hip, something. So the grandmother's dying, right? So first I understood it in context of, she's just talking about why she forgot about me. So I was like, "Oh, it's, no problem," and started talking about myself. And then I noticed she seemed hung up on the grandmother a little bit. And it's just reading little micro expressions. And I was like, So I put my hand, she's standing, I'm sitting. So I put my hand up on her like hip and I said, "I'm so sorry to hear about your grandmother." And then she talks about the grandmother.
Yeah, right. Good job.
I did it. I definitely missed it at first, and I still miss it. I don't even think of those. I think of those as more social cues. And to me that's like, yeah, it's manipulative, but it's kind of like the manipulation of being polite, still for me. So I agree with you. To get to this issue though of where you said, you're troubled by the fact that psychopaths manipulate. That's like the troubling thing.
Well, I think everybody manipulates, first of all. And I honestly, like, the most damaging people in my life have been some of the most emotional people in my life. And they were the most manipulative, but I don't know that they were psychopaths. They were in most cases like borderline or something. I don't think it's unique to sociopaths, but any person, sociopath or not, who gets joy out of the puppeteering of other humans feels, I'm just gonna go back to my other thing. I'm like, boo, that feels yucky. I don't like it.
Ooh, yeah, I get it. Let me kind of say that I don't condone this at all in saying this next explanation part, but I think it kind of maybe explains why this could happen the way it does. If you think about who else also manipulates, like blatant manipulation, it's children, right? Children, even babies are like, are manipulating you. They're crying, they're crying. Like babies who are nonverbal will cry, fake cries,
Can confirm.
Um, and the reason why we're not bothered by it is because, I don't know, they're like children and we feel like we're not sucked in. We're not tricked a little bit. So I think part of the reason why why it feels so yucky is maybe the idea that it's unlike babies, like the psychopaths are able to do it really well. Number one. Number two, so that kind of explains why that might feel so icky to you compared to some of the manipulation that you already know and expect, like the bank teller lady, or talking to a cop, or whatever, these situations that you know and expect, is that you're not expecting it. And you're not even aware it's happening, and often you're not even aware until, like, very much after the fact, or not at all. I think that freaks people out. And definitely after, like, I wrote the book, like, I got a email from one of my colleagues, like, one of my friends, and he was like, "I don't know if you were manipulating me all the time or something," and I was like, "Why would I?" Like,
Yes.
don't flatter yourself.
Right. Also, though, I can totally empathize with that feeling of like,
Yes.
wait, then what was real? Was
Yep.
anything real?
With that said, the reason I think why psychopaths do it is kind of like twofold, and I think they both relate to the weak sense of self. Number one is they have such like a weak sense of their own personhood, basically nothing idea of their own personhood. So they have like a very, and I think this is true of children too. I think this is why children manipulate, is because they don't have a sense of their own personhood, they can't really understand the personhood of others. And they can't understand what a violation it would be to to try to manipulate somebody. Because I think of personhood as you have like kind of a self-concept, and you have like a natural expectation of autonomy. Those are kind of like the two core aspects of personhood I think of. And like, so if like little kids, like this is to get a little sideways for a hot second, if little kids are like kind of like touching each other in this like play game, I don't think we think there's been sexual assault, because it's like we should probably teach them, look, like this is something maybe that's okay at 2, the age of 2 or whatever. If you guys happened upon this or something, stumbled upon this, sure, or whatever. But like, you have to get consent. You guys can't give consent because you're too little,
They're
et
called
cetera, et
privates
cetera.
for a reason. Yes. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they don't even have the conception of consent or whatever. And neither do psychopaths. They don't have really the conception of what it means to consent, or how violative that would be to do to somebody who has not consented, because of people's reasonable expectation of autonomy and having things done to them which they haven't consented to do. I think the other thing about, so that's kind of two. Number 3 and final thing about manipulation is like, this is why I went to therapy, is to stop manipulating, because I knew it was hurting my relationships. That was like the one thing I thought of all my psychopathic traits. I thought, this is the one thing I know is hurting my life, my day-to-day life, because I have a hard time maintaining relationships because they don't want to be manipulated all the time. So I went to my therapist. My therapist was like, just stop doing things for somebody else's kind of benefit, Jamie. Just do what you want to do in that moment. Instead of being like, I'm going to choose choice A in order to get this outcome, just choose what is your natural preference. But it turned out like I didn't know what my natural preference is, and so that's why I had to go through this whole process of strengthening my sense of self. Because if you don't have a sense of self, like, how would you choose? If I said, if there's no sense of self and I'm like, are you going to go to law school or theology school, Jamin? What would you say?
Yeah, I think whatever my community expects of me or something. I don't know.
Exactly. And that's manipulation, or whatever your spouse expects of you, or whatever. Whenever you're acting based on somebody's expectations, which is really just you're trying to meet a need or a want or a desire. And that's usually what manipulation is with psychopaths. And people usually kind of don't complain about that part. But it's still manipulation, right? It's still them not being themselves. It's still them doing something in order to get a particular reaction from you, which is, like you're going to law school in order to please your wife or whatever, let's say, might be the choice that you make. That's manipulative. It happens to benefit the wife, I guess, if that's the thing she wanted you to do, but it's still manipulation. The thing that like bothers people is when the manipulation is like, I do the same thing, but instead of like pleasing you, I choose to kind of please myself, which is to, do this thing without you knowing that I'm doing it because I know you disapprove, But and number 4 of all these points about manipulation, one of the biggest things though with manipulation is just the masking. The masking I think people find to be creepy and manipulative. But that one is actually, I think, not the psychopath's problem. It is your problem. You, the cultural you, everybody you. It's whoever has the expectation that psychopaths can't just be honest about the fact that they have no moral reasoning. It's whoever has the expectation, that it creeps them out, in the same way that you couldn't possibly say that like gay dudes in the 50s, were wrong for lying about it. Because they couldn't not lie about it without like having all these social consequences. It's the same thing with psychopaths. It's like, I would say 40% of my lying and manipulation was that sort of lying and manipulation, was like, I was just hiding. Because the reason why I was hiding is because of groups of people that I was afraid of.
And I think that everybody, the majority of people at least, are doing this without knowing it. Like they don't have a diagnosis, but and I think this is what leads to that deep sense of like not being seen and not being heard, because that you're a phony, even if you're not conscious of it. Like there's a sense of like, I woke up in the world today. Okay, who am I again? Like, what do I like? What do I not like? What are my opinions? How am I supposed to go out in the world? Okay, ready, set, here we go. Don't contradict past self, and try to make some kind of coherent narrative of my life. And yeah, it's I think if we could see that from the outside, we would see how much effort we put into masking instead of just being whatever we are today.
And that's why it makes sense to me, actually, the Buddhists saying that our self is the root of our struggle.
So the thing about like the expectations, like I was recalling that like when I was a kid, there was a certain point at which I think it was like somewhere around 12 or 13, like I asked my parents to stop giving me gifts for Christmas because I would rather not have a gift than get the gift and then have the expectation of like you're watching me open it and then like I have to make you happy with my reaction to the gift that I'd rather, can I just opt out of this thing? I don't want gifts anymore because like the need to perform for you over this thing that's supposed to be for me. This is really for you. Why don't you just get yourself a gift and leave me out of it? I'm not having fun. I think one of the things that is that I'm realizing is most troubling to me about being manipulated is I don't I'm not aware of the ways to manipulate me, and it feels really intrusive for you to know, oh wait, if you touch my elbow, I'm going to agree with you? Like get out of me. Like that's not like that's like breaking into my like picking the lock on my house or like this is supposed to be locked. I'm supposed to be in control of me, and the fact that you're in control of me, that feels in ways that I don't even know. Like I know like flattery and all that stuff, but then you know other ones that like, when you shake my hand, if you just like, you're there for another like quarter second or whatever it is, the mirroring of me, like that's the part that feels like I'm no longer in control of me and I'm being puppeteered. I think that's the ickiness factor that is like, it's not even about the other person. It's just about my own sense of like, I'm not as me having to face the fact that I'm not as in control of myself as I think that I am. That's troubling.
Yeah, I can totally see why that would be troubling, and I think there are kind of, like, 2 aspects to "you're not in control," is number 1, there's just stuff like your brain's not, like, giving you the information, like, there's some physical, evolutionarily, whatever way that you're smelling the pheromones, you're like, "That's a sexy person." It's just their smell, whatever it means to be sexy, it's just their smell or whatever, and the second one is that it is true there are, so that there's kind of that, let's say, call them like the lizard brain, kind of like things that people can hack into your brainstem, basically, if they understand that sort of stuff. The second idea is like the stories that you tell yourself, and I would say that, for instance, I listened to it was a really interesting podcast. It was on the Tim Ferriss show, and it was Apollo Robbins, who is like a magician slash pickpocket, and he was talking about both. Like he even has like worked, I think, with neuroscientists about like if he goes from to your pocket like directly to his pocket in a straight line, people will track that subconsciously. They will notice that, but if he goes like in like a half little circle, they will not track it. And I think that's an interesting lizard brain hack. But he also talked about this other side of it where he has all these ways in which he makes himself seem low status to other people, because when he seems low status to them, they treat him as less of a threat. So they don't pay as much attention to him. They consider him less, just kind of in general. They don't even give as much thought to him. So he intentionally like lowers his status to other people in these like different ways, and that is kind of a story you tell yourself hack. And so I think it's hard with the lizard brain hacks. I mean, that's our lizard brain. Like, who knows what our brain's doing in which it tracks, a direct versus an arc differently. I think there are sort of lessons to be learned, though, from the stories that you tell yourself to realize that, like, this idea of status is an illusion. And that if you buy into it, people will mess with you, and just kind of like if you're not, again, tracking reality, about stuff, then yeah. So I think of it as less that you're not in control as much as you think you are, as you probably are choosing to pay attention to different things. You're prioritizing what you're thinking about, and if your priorities like, what's a good and this is kind of how I thought in ayahuasca too, to realize that, like, I mean, a really good example is, like, when I move my hand like this, my eyes just see a blur. They don't really see motion, and that's one thing I kind of like about birds is that they can track they can see the motion much better than
I
we
didn't know that.
can.
Okay.
Yeah, especially, like, predator birds,
Okay.
yeah,
Higher
so they
frames per second.
yeah, they can exactly. It's, like, so much more high def, the motion than it is for us. But then during the ayahuasca, I could also see motion better, and to realize it's not, like, my eyes, it's my mindset that is, like, the limiting factor, and that I bet if I trained my brain somehow to see motion better, there probably are humans who, like, have for whatever reason, maybe hunter-gatherer types, however long years ago, if you're religious, 6,000 years
Yes.
ago.
Sure. Okay. All those years ago. Eternity. Yes.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
where they could see the motion,
Yeah.
and just like your mind has adapted to the things that you value, and your values come kind of from context, and that there is like some just chance, like accidents of whatever thing happening, but that you are not your filters, like if you can like somehow kind of like put space between you and your filter, it's kind of like you're not your like eyeglasses if you have eyeglasses, if you can kind of understand that the eyeglasses are giving you just a different reality, not even reality still. Your vision's just giving you one version of reality. It's just the spectrum of light within that narrow band. It's not even the full spectrum of light. It's not even the full spectrum of sound that we're listening to. Like the dogs are hearing things that we can't hear, and now the young people can hear things that we don't hear. And to kind of just understand these things, I think like the more it's interesting, the more like rigid we are about our worldview and our self view, I think the easier it is to manipulate people because then it's like, oh, like now I know. Because think about it with physics. Like if I know that something's like a solid, whatever beam of wood or something, I can push really hard on it. I can apply a lot of force and it's not going to give. Instead, it's going to get pushed the way I push it.
So then what are the characteristics of a person that you would see as a psychopath and go, "Oh, this person, they're pushover. It's almost not fun because they're too easy."
If they're, like, too easy, it's probably because they're like a people-pleasing, like, victim. Somebody who's been victimized so many times, they're like, "I recognize you. You're somebody who's gonna victimize me," and that kind of, like that's the story they tell themselves too, is that they're not in control, and so they need somebody around them to take control, and I'm like, "I don't wanna be part of this." Now I feel like I'm, like, your slave.
Wow. Okay. The old double reverse.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I've got a million more questions, but your perspective is awesome and needed, and I appreciate you sharing it with the world.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate you. I should say, about the manipulation thing, I don't manipulate people anymore. Like, that is one of the things once I adopted a stronger sense of self, I just thought it's worth more to me to always just meet the reality of me where I am and the reality of other people where they are and the reality as it exists than it is to have, like, any other outcome. Like, I don't need to have any sort of orchestration to get any particular things. I can just let things come as they come and experience life as it is and not need anything to be different. And I also think my personhood matters so much to me now that I would never violate the personhood of another person, for nothing. I would rather somebody's like, yeah, the Stanford prison experiment, like, shock this person. I'd be like, nope.
Right. Yeah.
Not doing it or whatever. But I think, yeah, so I don't think that's a psychopathic thing. I think you can kind of like get to a different place or whatever. It's just hard. It's hard because how do you get there is the really difficult thing. That's the most challenging thing, I think, for everybody. How do you get from where you are right now to being in reality, to stop telling yourself stories, to like everybody gets stuck sometimes. And so I understand that too. So I have like a lot of cognitive empathy for everybody about that.
Well, I think that's also the true for just like honesty in general. Like, why would a person be honest? Well, because the book says you have to be, except for the times it says don't be. All that aside, like, there's other better reasons. Like, when you're honest, like, your life goes better. There are pragmatic reasons to do this thing that we call morality. The more perspectives we have on that, I feel like the deeper and more meaningful that gets. So,
Absolutely.
thanks again for joining me. If you haven't already, you'll want to go check out part 1. And I've got a separate solo video coming out on psychopaths and pedophilia. And if you want to get notified when that's released, you not only have to subscribe, but also do that little bell thing. The book, Confessions of a Sociopath, is sold everywhere that inferior books are sold for much higher prices. Like mine. Hers is a better deal. Please buy both. And here's to hope for a better world for all kinds of different people with different perspectives. Weirdos like you and me. I'm rooting for us, which means I'm rooting for you, and I think that you should too.